In 2010, Youngsuk became the first Asian to be elected president of the International Publishers Association. Unsurprisingly, he is a respected leader in the international knowledge industry. Chi followed his diplomat father to the United States in his youth. While at Princeton, he met Bronson Ingram, the American businessman and billionaire who turned his life around. He is currently the chairman of Elsevier, one of the top 3 publishers of science journals. Elsevier is a publishing company with 430 years of tradition. It is the world's largest publisher of medical, scientific, and engineering texts. Working with research institutes, it publishes about 2,000 journals and books, including the prestigious Lancet and Cell. Chi takes hundreds of flights in the course of a year to ensure the future of the international publishing industry in a fast-changing world. This week on Heart to Heart, we talk to President Chi Youngsuk about the secret to his success on the world stage. So, Mr. Chi, it's very nice to meet you, and thank you for coming on Heart to Heart. I know that you were elected the first Asian to be elected as president of the International Publishers Association, and since then you've overseen the improvement and also the innovation of the organization. But I think a lot of people, including myself, are not actually familiar with IPA. So could you give us a brief introduction of IPA and what you do?
IPA is a trade association that was created among publishers to create fraternity and also to help each other improve the industry. This was formed about 130 years ago. I'm not quite precise on that. And it has really been very Eurocentric, as was the publishing industry at the time. So it has always had a European and a couple of American publishers as its leaders. This time, I felt that the industry is going through so much change through the digital world that it would make sense for me to intervene and see if I can help those that are not moving as fast in the transformation from paper to electronic. And kind of daringly, I ran for the post, having only been involved with it for about 6 months, and here I am.
Wow.
So the IPA as a whole really started with 2 pillars. The first pillar is the promotion of copyright rights of the authors and publishers to exploit the work. And second is to protect the right to express, the right to publish, so that the persecution by governments and others would gradually disappear around the world. Those are the 2 real missions, should I say, of IPA. Lately, the transformation into digital world has added a lot of other purposes that could be very helpful to the members, and that includes the digitization and all that comes with it, from piracy to technology to consumer demand and so on and so forth, and of course standardization.
Okay. Well, not only you're really brought to IPA is the innovations and the digitalization, but also you've stressed before that it's important to remember that publishing is a business, and we need to take a business approach to even cultural production, such as books. I would think that that's a given. I mean, of course, publishing is also a business, but was it difficult to bring that thought across to the members of the IPA and the publishing world?
I think for the members of IPA, it wasn't as big a challenge as the general public. I always emphasize the concept of ambidexterity. So left hand, right hand. And on one hand, content is where we come from. The passion for that content, the accuracy, the timeliness of that content, the uniqueness of that content really matters a lot. And I think that's what we are all about in our DNA. But that will disappear unless we run it as a business. Because to sustain that passion, it needs to be desirable to the consumers. And we have to run it efficiently. We need to run it with a sense of urgency. And so perhaps I added in my tenure a bit more of that sense of urgency to our members. And I think that I really have tremendous support from the publishers that this is the way they want to go as well.
I imagine a large part of that has to do with the digitalization, because I know that many people thought the internet would mean the demise of the paper book or the publishing industry. But quite contrary. I mean, things have turned out quite differently, haven't it? But how have you brought innovation and digitalization to improve the business side?
I don't want to take any credit for it. I think I was part of all that movement from P to E. You know, we have to be extraordinarily sensitive, not to what it is we want to publish, but what it is that you want to read. It's all about the consumers. Whether it's a consumer in a professional setting, like a lawyer who needs to get the best legal opinion books, or whether it's you and I wanting to read a romantic novel on the beach one day, we have to be sensitive to what it is that the consumer wants. And when you think from that perspective as to whether I, who doesn't know that book, would want to pick it up and make it part of my collection of knowledge and fun, I think we would be innovative. Because I think consumers today, boy, they're changing fast. And we got to keep up with them, right? So digitization itself was considered at first to be something that publishers could not adapt to. Well, they were wrong. A lot of people called the death of publishing world.
Right.
Well, it's not the case. And today we have all types of different books. It's not just cover to cover with the pages in between. We have live books that change content constantly. We have books that relate to each other. You know, we're going to see novels that have different endings depending on how you want to see it end. That's really the kind of innovation that our publishing community, my fellow publishers, have been doing and will be doing a lot more of. Right. So publishing is not dead.
Definitely. And I think the internet has already helped, because a lot of us, of course, are so familiar with Amazon, and that has helped us get access to so many different books outside of physical bookstores.
Correct.
And I understand that you played a part in creating or setting up print-on-demand distribution. Again, that's something that even I wasn't familiar with. We always thought, you know, books are made in these huge factories, lots of papers, and we make them in advance, and they're in inventory, and that's why we have the warehouses. That's where all the lots of copies are. But lightning source, demand, how do you do that?
You know, Amazon.com really wanted to set a new standard for how easy it was to be able to buy a book. And so many of us would look for a book and it wasn't available in a bookstore.
Right.
And he made it possible. And he demanded on us as the supplier, the largest wholesale distributor of books called Ingram Book, which I was running at the time with my friend, John Ingram, to make sure that we doubled the number of titles we carried. Well, that's a very expensive venture.
How many titles are we talking about?
We were having 500,000 and he demanded 1 million titles.
The tagline, of course, Amazon.
Exactly. So we thought about how could we see the inventory at the publishers, quickly get it, and then get it to him. And the fastest we could do was probably 15 to 20 days. That just wasn't good for the consumers. Why would you want to wait that long for something? So we came up one day, I was home, and I received a statement in the mail of my insurance. And it was customized to me. It was really customized to exactly what I insured, how much I would have to pay, what was covered, and so on. And I said, gee, if a statement could be like that, why can't I make a book that way? And we thought about digitizing the book, keeping the file in an electronic image, and when you would order a book, we would quickly manufacture one copy and ship it directly to you, not even going through Amazon, but in an Amazon envelope.
How long would it take to create a new book?
So a 300-page book would take 18 seconds.
18 seconds?
18 seconds, with no inventory to worry about, no extra movement, no capital tied up, no loss. And the quality was phenomenally good. It had the same color cover on it. The only thing we couldn't do at that time, which we do today, is that we could not make hardcover book. With hardcover outside with a jacket around it. That took too much work and it wasn't fast enough.
But now you do.
Now we do. And back then we were making what we call paperback, right? And there were skeptical people who said, that can't be good enough quality.
Get some blank pages in between her.
Right. And, the ink would smudge and all that. And we actually ran the test with people to put the real copy of the book that was printed offset, 1,000 copies, we'd pull one copy. And we would take one copy of our book and we'd tell them, and they couldn't tell the difference with the naked eye.
Wow.
So it got it adopted more and more, one publisher at a time. And today, we can't imagine a world without print on demand. We can't.
Very true.
And I think that just took place in a mere 15 years. And I think it reflects on how adaptive our industry is and how unafraid we are to use technology to solve the problems that we have from having been in the business for 400 years.
Right. Were ebooks available then when you created Lightning Source? I know
You've
that
obviously done your homework. The answer is yes, there was, but it wasn't successful. There were a few formats of ebooks that came out at that time. One of them was called Rocket ebook, and we used the same image to deliver the ebook to that machine. It was just a bit early. First of all, it was too expensive, and secondly, there weren't enough book files. Amazon, again, was brilliant to aggressively put out a machine, a hardware that was low cost enough for people to try.
Right.
And it didn't have all the bells and whistles. It was just text and a little image, black and white. But it got what we call install base. And then they started to make it fancier. And now we're going the other direction, right? Where we're taking things like Galaxy Pad and going backward to book. Instead of basic to add function, functional back to basic. And now all of us can read books on a Galaxy smartphone or Galaxy Pad, as well as our screen on the computer or even on a watch, which is phenomenal progress.
So all that ease in producing content, I imagine, also creates demand for new, diverse content. How has the industry been keeping up with demand for greater, newer content? I imagine that's the key, really.
It is, and I think we're in the middle of the second stage revolution. So the first stage revolution was the P to E migration, right? The P content, paper content, to E content, which is digitized electronic content, but it kind of looks exactly the same. It kind of does the same thing.
Yes.
Where we are in the middle of right now is to go from E content to S content, which is solution content. It's no longer good enough for us to give you a content. That content must give you a solution to what you're looking for. Publishing is really in three different buckets today. One is the book that you and I read for pleasure or for self-improvement. Another is books dedicated to education, whether that's kindergarten or university. And then the third type of books are what we call professional books, things that you and I must read if you're going to be good at what we do. Right?
Yes.
Yes, I know. So this sector of publishing has already run away with it. So my colleagues in the health science division of Elsevier, for example, they have taken the content of 100 years of journals and more than 100 years of reference books and whatnot. They do a text mining and data mining on it, and they extract knowledge that actually gives a physician and a nurse a practical order to a patient's need. That is what is possible in a digitalized content. You reuse the content toward a solution, right? Education is getting to a point where it can be customized to a student. You've got a problem doing division, she's got a problem doing multiplication, and I've got a problem doing addition. Our textbook will have different content or slightly different content, and it certainly will have different practice tests behind it. Right? So that's beginning to change. It's in the consumer book area that the change is still very at an infant stage. But even there, I believe in my heart that we're going to see something that I call virtual reality, or a experiential book. In the old days, when it was words on a paper, the imagination in our head created the variety. It will still do that. But I think as publishers, we're going to add a little bit of zest in it. And it's going to be different. Mm-hmm. And sometimes as you're reading the ebook, and as it talks about a parade, you're going to hear the parade music in the background. Or you're going to tap on it, and you're going to go to an image of that parade. Mm-hmm. Or if you're talking about your mother baking a pie,
you'll smell.
You're going to smell it. You're going to see that pie in an image. Mm-hmm. You may actually get the recipe for that pie, right? It's all different experience. Mm-hmm. I think that is not very far from now. Wow. And I think that's the only way that we could possibly compete against games, movies, and other form of experience.
Well, the international publishing industry is responding to advances in technology with innovations of its own, as we've just heard. And we're going to talk to IPA President Mr. Chi about the dynamic changes, more dynamic changes that are going on in the publishing world right after this.
He was, at the time, one of the top 40 richest person in America. He called me up, and I was in Singapore at the time, and he said, "Happy birthday, Youngsuk." I said, "Well, thank you. And now you're mine."
Oh.
Excuse me?
On your 30th birthday.
Yeah.
Some of these technical innovations and dynamic changes are not being welcomed in the publishing industry. So now we're going to talk about some of the pros and cons about bringing the publishing world into the 21st century. We were talking a little bit about all these changes and technical innovations that we're going to bring to books to maybe increase the experience of reading. But again, I wonder, bringing those sensory, the smells, the different cooks, different information,
recipes,
right?
or maps.
Doesn't that actually sometimes maybe counter the big advantage of books, which allows you to use your imagination, which allows you to focus, to eliminate all that digital buzz and just focus on something and become centered and quiet? How do you answer
It's
that?
absolutely valid concern, and one that publishers are trying very, very hard to be sensitive about. The good thing is that in an ebook, you have the option to turn it on and off. You don't have to experience all of these, right? Mm-hmm. When an author writes these words or these information, it needs to always provide a little buffer so that the reader can choose how close they want to come or how far they want to stay. And when a book serves as a mechanism, a refuge from the forever connected world, we need to give them that option to turn it off. Mm-hmm. And that's there. But for some people, for the exactly same content, they want to be hyper with it. Well, let them have the option. So that is the kind of variation that we have to provide. And I think that from a humanist point of view, what you just asked is precisely the kind of sensitivity that we as publishers must reflect in our content. That we cannot be prescriptive to people.
Right. You're giving them the option, but once again, when we started out using mobile phones, we're just happy to get an incoming call or make a call and it would not cut off in the middle. Now we can't imagine having a phone without internet connection. It was an option maybe and we paid extra for it, but now it's a given. Everyone's, so we're super hyper connected all the time. Do we need to give that option to books as well? Is this the only way that we could reach out to the young people and say, read more, read more?
You know, I think you've just pointed out something really, really important, and that is the variety of consumers we have to please. We can't anymore produce one type of content in one style and expect that we're going to reach the variety of audience. I, for one, I don't want those for all of my books. I want him for some books, but not for all. And yet, my daughters, who are very capable, should I call it, of being multitasker, they
It's a
want it
woman
all
thing.
and
Yeah,
more,
yeah.
right? And so if they and I are going to read the same book, it probably needs to be able to cater to both types of demand. And I think that's really going to be true for all forms of media entertainment or information that we're going to consume. There are people who, when they're a scholar, researcher, they're only going to want the content, just the words and a few diagrams and a graph. Others are going to want to click on the graph and be able to see it enlarged and then superimpose another graph on top of it and then download it to a PowerPoint so he or she can go to a classroom the next day and do a lecture around it. That is, we have to serve both. And it's that variety that we have to attend to as good publishers, which makes it very expensive to be able to produce content like that. And contrary to what people like to believe, that digital is cheap, it is not cheap. It's actually a lot more expensive to produce.
But there's no paper, no ink involved.
Right, so the cost of delivery of a second copy is significantly reduced. But the cost to produce the first copy has augmented. And that's what we have to deal with as an industry. We're not complaining about it, but it's the reality.
That's interesting. Okay, well, let's go back a little bit because, well, let's talk about your personal involvement or how you got into publishing, because you did not come from a traditional publishing background. You were in banking, actually, for about 10 years before you entered publishing. Banking and publishing, I would imagine, are very different. Maybe the only thing that's the similarity is that, yes, it's a business, but very different. How did you go from banking to publishing?
Well, there are a couple of intermediate steps in there too, but they were related. I came out of business school with a finance degree, and I really thought that I could make a difference to our country, which was in growth stage and needing a lot of loans, that I could be helpful. And I learned banking, and it was very, very good training ground for finance. And also, I wasn't just a banker. I actually ran a bank. So it was really more general management role. When I turned 30 years old, I had a call from my best friend's father, who was also my American mentor. I call him my American father. And there's a story behind that too. But he called me up, and I was in Singapore at the time, and he said, "Happy birthday, Youngsuk." And I said, "Well, thank you. And now you're mine."
Oh.
Excuse me?
On your 30th birthday?
Yeah. And I said, "Mr. Ingram, can you tell me what this is about?" And he said, "Do you remember the first time we met? I was 19 years old, and we were having dinner. He invited his son and his son's friends to a very fancy restaurant on campus for dinner. And apparently, he asked me whether I would want to come and work for his company when I graduated from college." He was, at the time, one of the top 40 richest person in America, running very, very large and successful businesses. And as a foreign student with no work permit, no work experience, that was an amazing proposition. Too good to be really true. I was honored, but I also remember that I didn't want to go to a business where somebody thinks that I was parachuted in because of my contact with the owner. And I said to him, apparently, that let me try to do this on my own for a while. And when I'm 30 and I have built a track record, I can go and work in your company legitimately.
Wow.
He remembered that. I didn't. So when he said that I was welcome, I said 30. Well, he remembered it. He happened to purchase a software and peripheral computer product distributor in Asia. And this was a company based in Nashville, Tennessee. And it was so far away, and he didn't have anybody he could trust to run a business. So he wanted me to take over that business and run it. That's how I got done moving. Now, we ended up not buying the company because the audit, the due diligence revealed some things that we didn't like. But I had already committed, so I went to work for him. And I ended up going to Belgium and France, because I speak French, to run those operations instead. And here I, found myself in IT distribution business. And I learned something extraordinarily valuable there about scaling things, to go from a $2 billion business to $30-some billion business. And from there, I got rid of the fear for technology. And then I went to Ingram Book, where POD was discovered by my friend and myself as a process. And from there, one of the publishers, publishing executive from Random House, the largest publishing company in the US, asked me to come in to be a business guy, chief operating officer. That's the circuitous way in which I found myself in publishing. It wasn't planned. And even today, I kind of pinch myself once in a while thinking, could this happen again? And I don't know. It's really about people. It had nothing to do with the industry.
So are you one of those people who've never failed, who always excel? And,
no.
And I'm going to have to ask you to be specific, yes.
My friends, when we're around, often describe me with 3 letters that I consider very important in my golf game. And it's letter PMA. And it stands for positive mental attitude. As a golfer, I swing and I hit the ball into the water. That's not good.
No.
And you drop the ball and you hit it again, right? At that moment, in my head, I don't think about putting the ball in the water again. I'm thinking to myself, this ball is going into the hole. I have to think that way. I have to be positive. Because if I don't, it will go in the water again.
Right.
I think I applied that also to my business world. I'd like to think of challenges as opportunities. And for me, it has worked out on average quite well in terms of taking risks. But many, many a times, I have failed. We've bought companies that we thought was going to be really additive to our business, and turned out that we didn't integrate them right, and we lost the value we paid for. We test today, and inside Elsevier, we ask our people to take risks. And my boss, Eric Engstrom, has a wonderful saying that I don't know if it's his or he's borrowed from somebody else, but he always says, fail often, but fail early. Because the early failures are not that expensive.
Before 30? Do you mean by age?
No, anything. So, if somebody says, I got this brilliant idea, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and it's going to cost $2 million. Can you approve $2 million investment? I would rather hear them saying, let me do a prototype, and that's going to cost $50,000 or maybe even $100,000.
Right.
Let's see if it works before we get terribly ambitious about the next $500,000. And then from there, another $5 million. So let's do it in steps. And I think that is the mentality in the Silicon Valley today. Everything is permanently beta version, right? And the way I equate that is, if I were to stand 2 steps off the ground and I jumped, what's the chance that I'm really going to get hurt? Not much. But if you and I climbed up the 13th floor of this building, and you and I decide, I wonder how much we could get hurt jumping, it will hurt.
Yes.
Right? So the same thing in our investment philosophy is, take lots of small risks in succession rather than one big risk.
Okay. Seems like a very, very wise lesson. When you also mentor to many people, I know that because you receive so much from these mentors like Mr. Ingram, what do you tell them when it comes to people? Obviously, the people that you meet will play a huge part in your life, but they say that these days, maybe We're a little bit more in tune with our smartphones than, face-to-face conversations, that our people skills are falling. What do you tell your mentees when it comes to forging relationships that will matter or learning from others?
Well, you just put, your finger on that word about forging a relationship, right?
How do you do that?
A relationship is very different from a transaction. I'm thirsty. You got water? I'll pay you. You give me the water.
Yeah.
That's a transaction. And that's very utilitarian. But in a relationship, you forge that relationship because one day you might want to lean on this person and vice versa. What I like to tell young people is to focus less on what, where, how, when, and just focus on whether you are surrounded in your life by people that you want to be around. You start with family, then friends and colleagues and your community. And if you surround yourself with the right people, everything goes well. And this people relationship is really lesson through doing, through practice. You have to be burned by your friend once in a while to really know how to be able to discern someone who really is going to be a friend of yours or who's going to be just an acquaintance. And what I like to do is to actually not just be a mentor, but be an engaging mentor, which is a reason why I don't just take on anybody as a mentor unless I'm prepared to commit my time.
Right.
And today, time is precious.
Yes.
When you're flying 200 days a year and you're moving country to country, it's not easy. But it is really all about who you are with as opposed to what it is that you do. And I think one other thing that I really like to clarify, because people ask me this all the time, I receive more than I give in mentoring. I want that to be absolutely clear to people. People think that somehow as a mentor to mentees that I'm always giving. That's not true. I receive tremendously more by simply understanding and them sharing with me their experiences. And I think that with that attitude, it's not a chore.
A pleasure.
It is a pleasure.
A privilege.
Privilege, learning, yeah. It is additive to my life.
Absolutely. Well, as busy as he is, Mr. Chi always makes time to meet with his mentees. So let's take a look as he shares the secrets to his good luck. Youngsuk came to Korea in May. It was a short visit, but he made sure to arrange a meeting with students. Chi is a businessman who has expanded the book industry by touting the advantages of e-books. At the same time, he is a mentor. Today, he gave a lecture on being a global leader to college students.
There are so much changes, and we need to make sure that we're not afraid to make the changes. But even those changes have to be in rational steps. So I'm hoping that my message is to encourage people to take risk, but not silly risk. Risk that is large enough that it makes a difference, but a risk that's small enough that the failure of it does not mean a permanent failure.
Chi has led a storied life. He has enjoyed facing the challenges of a varied career in banking, IT, and publishing with integrity and hard work. In addition to lecturing, Chi heads up a mentoring program so he can share his experiences and expertise with young people around the world. When he does meet with them, he emphasizes the importance of communication.
Singularly, the most important thing is that I leave behind as many people that feel optimistic about their own lives. And so through lectures like this and meetings with young people, I think I have an opportunity to deliver that optimism that I enjoyed through my life.
Chi is always looking for new challenges, innovations, and the chance to recreate something. He is truly a role model for today's youth. Well, it looks for sure that Mr. Chi is inspiring a lot of students. But she mentioned before that you don't like to take on too many mentees so that you can devote your time and energy properly. So how many mentees do you have?
360.
360.
Yes.
I thought maybe 2 digits at most.
Well, 2 digits actively on a say weekly. If you were to look at any given week, yes, but
Wow.
on an ongoing basis, yeah. Some of them I hear from once a year.
And what do you do with them? This mentoring program I know that you're running. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
I don't run a program.
No?
I wish you were systematic. It's just that I'm available to them.
For
I'm
any
available
advice?
for advice or just to listen sometimes. I told you I get more out of it than I give. So sometimes it's just being there to listen. And other times it's really to talk about some very serious issues that are difficult to discuss with other people. And everything in between. Everything in between.
I imagine there's some universal advice that you give out, though. I imagine probably related to people, treating people well, or recognizing that the relationships are very special and they'll go a long way. I also wonder, when it comes to academic or career-wise, is there sort of a universal advice that you can
Sure.
give them, like read more books? Or
I should say that, right? My universal advice to people, young people, is don't do what people tell you to do. Do what you want to do.
What if you don't know what you want to do?
You have to test before you know whether you want to do something or not. You can't read about it. You can't let your uncle tell you. You certainly can't have your parents tell you that. You have to try. And sometimes it's process of elimination and sometimes it's process of selection. But I do tell everybody uniformly that you should do what you want to do. And if you think you want to do X and it turns out not to be it, that's a great lesson. It's a lesson worth taking. Because if you do something you want to do, the chances are you're going to be good at it. And we live in a world today where you can be good at anything and it matters. The days when my parents' generation said you had to be this or you had to be that, a doctor, lawyer, government servant, those days are gone. I think that to be a wonderful chef is a fabulous life. To be a great kindergarten teacher because you're passionate about teaching young kids, or to be a government servant, or to be a painter or writer, or an announcer anchor like you. As long as you do something you like, the chances are really good that you're going to be very good at it. And the rewards will come with it, meaning that you'll have other options from there.
I think a lot of young people, because there's so much competition now, it's much harder to find a job than when the economy was just booming. So they're afraid of making the wrong step, especially right out of college. The first step they think will set them for life. But have times changed so much that is the case? Or
No.
we can
no.
switch tracks and we can change
Well,
directions, no?
I think, in fact, it's gone the other way. I think my father's generation was one career, one company, one institution all your life.
Yeah.
I think my generation is about 2, maybe 3. My children, I expect them to have 5 different careers, at least.
Wow.
I hope so. I think they get bored faster than we do. They also accomplish faster than we do. And so I don't think there's anything wrong. And this idea that somehow your first step is so critical, I just don't think that is consistent with what I said about take risk, fail often, fail early. I don't think that is consistent. To be failing often and to fail early, you do need to not worry about every choice you make has to be right. No.
Exactly. To have to make that very important decision when you're still in your early 20s, it's asking a lot.
It is asking a lot. How would you know it at age 18 what really you want to be. I mean, I recall having this conversation with my eldest daughter saying, hey, sweetie, how would you know you don't want to be an art historian unless you've taken a course in high school? And it doesn't offer in high school, right? She did major in art history, and she's really good at it. But that's not what she's doing right now. One day she might. And I think it's that mentality that it is actually, if anything, it should be really encouraging people. It should actually liberate people to take more risk as a young person.
Okay, I think you can write a bestseller about your life and the advice that you can give out to the mentees. You can reach a lot more people than 360, no? Have you toyed with the idea?
I have been asked if I could write a book about me and my very, very lucky life. I think it'd be very boring.
Oh, no.
So I don't know whether it would make much sense. You know, modern media like this, I don't know how many people will watch this program, but you know, if that conveys to a lot of people, why not? Certainly, as I said, I don't do this because there's any agenda. I learn a lot from them. I think that I feel forever young by being around them. You know, if a book is a mode, yeah, maybe, but I don't like to bring too much attention to this.
Okay. Well, in 2004, Elsevier founded Scopus, a database for academic journal articles from around the world. And not too long ago, it celebrated its 10th anniversary here in Korea. And we were there along with a few hundred guests, including librarians and researchers. Let's take a look. Elsevier is the world's largest publisher of medical, scientific, and engineering texts. Its catalog includes the illustrious medical journals Lancet and Cell, as well as the classic textbook Gray's Anatomy. In June, Elsevier's research database, Scopus, celebrated its 10th anniversary with a party in Seoul. The occasion brought together 100 librarians. Youngsuk came to Korea especially for this event and gave a speech on navigating the digital world through innovation.
Today, there is so much production of research output, and without having a very reliable, clean, and complete data, it's very difficult for researchers to know how to find each other's work. So I think that Scopus, by incorporating the largest number of journals in the world, is the source for search for our researchers.
He spoke about how the digitization of information will affect the publishing industry and emphasized the expanding role of librarians.
지금 디지털 학술 출판 이 산업 자체가 되게 빠르게 변화를 하고 있는데 이 과정에서 지영석 회장님의 리더십이 어떻게 영향을 줄지 지켜보고 싶습니다.
He himself is an expert on content and technology, which has helped him become a giant in the publishing industry. We look forward to seeing more of his innovative endeavors. I'm here with Youngsuk Chi, president of the International Publishers Association. Now, Elsevier's parent company is Reed Elsevier. It's a multinational publishing and information company. And I also understand that this parent company also organizes exhibitions, 600 worldwide, one of which is the London Book Fair. And this spring, we were also very happy to have a guest here on Heart to Heart, Hwang Sun-mi, who was featured, the market-focused author of the day. We had her on, of course, before the London Book Fair. So could you tell us, what was the response to Hwang and maybe some of the other Korean authors we showcased?
Yeah, I was really grateful that the government of Korea and the Publishing Association of Korea put in the investment of time to translate some of these books, brought many of them over to introduce Korean authors. You know, we're very lucky to have remarkable language that Sejongdaewang created, but it's also a very difficult language to translate.
Especially into English.
Into any language for that matter. And, you know, we have to really invest as a country to bring as much of our content as possible to the rest of the world. Whether that's Chinese, whether that's French or Japanese or English, We just have to be able to invest in that. And it may take 10 or 20 years of continuous investment before it really pays off, but it will pay off. And I was so glad at London Book Fair to see some of these books having been properly translated with the help of Korean Literature Translation Agency or Association. I don't know the exact name, but and they were really well received because when it's done right, they get to see the voice of that writer even in a different language. And I think it was a moment of pride. I like to see the government continue to invest behind it, the translation aspect of it. I think it's going to be very important.
In addition to translation, I imagine another strength could be our strength in IT, the many technical innovations and the changes that will come about in the publishing industry.
Right.
I imagine Koreans could be quite adept at creating that digital content for that sort of device.
And in fact, the Korea booth at London Book Fair had equally as many e-book service companies as publishers and authors. And I think we actually projected a very different kind of image as a country than other guest of honors in the past years. In the past years, they would bring a slew of their authors and just a lot of books. Our booth was very modern. It was clean and it was IT supported, tech supported. And I met people from all sorts of companies, book distributors, ebook creators, and like Book Jam. I mean, wow, what a great idea they have. And I hope that they're successful in convincing foreign publishers to use that technology and service. So it was a good way of showcasing that there's more than just the content behind. You're absolutely correct in that.
And there is a market for it? There is a hunger for Korean content?
Yeah. I'm not sure it's so much the Korean content to start with, but I think the Korean content service is not to be underestimated. But there, it's still very small, a lot of very small entities. And one of the things that I say about the Korean publishing industry, and sometimes people don't like to hear this, is that we have entities that are not large enough to take sufficient risks. And I would like to see our publishing industry and publishing service industries to consolidate into larger entities that can take more risks. You know, and some of them say, "Oh, blasphemy!"
Yes, I can imagine.
It's all about culture and unique individualism. And I think that there is a balance between the two. If we became very monotonic, then we would not have served the market properly. But at the same time, there's got to be a critical mass. And as you look, we're considered some top 10-ish book industry in the world. If you look at the others in that top 10, every country has leading publishers of a sufficient size.
Right.
Whether that is the US, UK, China, Japan, France, Australia, Brazil. They're always leading entities that are large enough. They push the industry, the rest come along behind, and that kind of ecosystem is perfectly healthy.
Does Korea have a big enough market for that, though? These other countries
yes,
I mentioned?
There is. But I think that when you divide up the market among 3,000 publishers, it's hard to have a single leader that is willing to make some of these bold. It doesn't have to be one. There always needs to be two of them so they can always compete. One's not good. But we are still under the impression by the great publishers that have started these things post-war, post-oppression government, that think that individual independence is more important than the ability to lead through innovation and risk-taking. And I hope that the next generation of publishers will be a bit more bold about it so that they can compete with the likes of Kodansha or Random House or China Publishing Group and so on and so forth.
Okay. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our interview. Thank you so much. It was fascinating and interesting and touching at the same time. Thank you so much, Mr. Ji.
You're so kind. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
And that was our interview with Mr. Youngsuk Chi, President of the International Publishers Association. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. You can watch it again on our homepage, arirangtv.com. And until next time, take care. Bye-bye. It's not too bad, your voice.